Welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Pastor Rick Utze from Maranatha Community Fellowship in Plain City, Ohio. You know, we're in summertime now, and the heat's starting to crank up again. And as we think about heat, and we think about what it takes to get through heat, sometimes it's hard, right? Some of us don't like heat as much as others do. And in that vein, we also go through trials and hardships in our life that I want to call heat. It's when things get tough, and when we wonder what's going on, and we wonder why this is happening to us, and we wonder, is anything good going to come out of this, and where is God, and we wonder if He's even good. And how do we know whether we wonder if He's good or not? When we start to complain, we're basically saying, I know my God's sovereign in our head, but when we complain, we say, I don't know if He actually has my good in mind here, because I don't understand it. And in the Bible, there's a story of a guy who had a rebellious son. And that son actually was so rebellious, he wanted to take over from his father and kill his father, and he turned people against his father. And his father had to actually flee, had to run away because his son was after him. And actually, this father's name was King David, and his son was Absalom, who wanted to take over the throne. And there was a bunch of bad things that happened in this story. If you go back to 2 Samuel chapters 14 to 18, you can read about it. But David was on the run from his son, and he was the king of Israel. And that had to be a time of extreme heat and distress for David. And as a matter of fact, when David's running away, you know, they come upon this guy who stands out there. In 2 Samuel 16, I love this. It says, there was this guy who was telling David, just get out, get away from here. You're getting what's due you. And can you imagine, David's here with some of his loyal supporters, and there's this guy yelling at him, cursing him. And one of his supporters said to David, hey, look, he says, this Benjamite is cursing you. He says, do you want me to take his head? And, you know, David's like, no, don't take his head. Leave him alone. It says, let him curse me. The Lord has told him to. Perhaps the Lord will see my affliction and restore goodness to me instead of the curses today. And so David was saying, you know what? Even in all this is kind of just piling on, but the Lord allowed him to do it. I'm just going to continue on, and maybe He'll bring goodness. And so David is just walking through all these trials and heat. And then Psalms 3. Here's what you should do. Go read Psalms 3 and 4. These are David's songs and prayers that he lifted up to God while he was going through this trial. And he says, Lord, how my foes increase. There are many who attack me. Many say about me, there is no help for him in God. But you, Lord, you're a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head. I cry aloud to the Lord, and He answers me from His holy mountain. You know, here's David worshiping God, basically on the run. And he's saying, you know what? Some people are saying, the Lord isn't going to help him. And he's saying, I cry out to my God. And he says then in verse 5 and 6, I lie down and sleep. Wake again, because the Lord sustains me. I will not be afraid of thousands of people who have taken their stand against me on every side. You know, here's David, and he's saying, I go to sleep in a cave, and I sleep just as well as I do in this cave as I did in my palace. Isn't that wonderful that David says, my God sustains me. I'm going to trust in Him. A lot of times when we go through heat, we want to run away. We want to blame other people, blame God. And David's just going to God, worshiping, saying, help me, God. I know you. He's basically saying, I know you have a purpose in this, and you're my security. You're my rock. And so even in the heat, David did that. And we may say, yeah, but he was a king. He's not a real guy. I mean, come on. How's that going to happen for me? And you have to know that David, earlier, when he had wealth and ease, he committed some of the most terrible acts you could have. He committed adultery. He plotted and had the woman's husband killed. And this David, God had just worked in his heart. So now that when this heat came, that even in the midst of that heat, fruit was coming forth out of David's life and heart. He was now trusting in his God. And God brings those situations into our life so that He can reveal our hearts to see, is that the kind of person we are? Do we trust in God above all things? The security of this world is nothing compared to the security we have in God. And so that is what David went through. So here's the bottom line. Psalms 4 says, David said, "You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and new wine abound. I will both lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, Lord, make me live in safety." You know, David's saying, I have more joy now than all the people who have all the things of this earth, because God, you are my security. Is God your security? Yes, we can bear fruit from the living water of the Holy Spirit in our lives if we truly worship Him and trust in Him and wait for Him to work in our lives. So I hope you know Him. I hope you know Jesus Christ, because He is where true peace lies. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Bottom Line.